general discussion about form of government, or he would not take them at all, but that would mean that one of us would have to take them. Which is, I get the sense
Answers
it's
its own question.
an unsavory option, I'm guessing. So how does
Well, it is
everybody
a
feel
recording.
about having Josh take the minutes?
It's fine by me.
I have no
I
problem.
have no objection, I think you might wanna come a little closer so you can hear better, but,
I'm all set. I
okay.
promise.
The other thing that Josh mentioned to me today, we just met for just a few minutes, was that he has some opinions regarding form of government if we want to ask him. And if we don't want to ask him, that's fine, but let's just think about that option when we get to our discussion. The first thing I'd like to, so thank you, Josh, and thank you all for your flexibility about the clerk, and there will be a hired clerk for our next meetings. I would like to have a motion, I should have done this when I set up the agenda, but I'd like to have a motion to change the order to, Milton, are you here for public comment?
Yes.
Okay, so may I have a motion then to move public comment to number 2, then the discussion with guests to number 3, and then the action on the minutes to number 4, and then leave the remainder of the agenda as is. Is there such a motion? There's Adam and John. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. So then, Milton, I ask you to share your comments.
Yeah, so on one of the minutes there, somebody brought up, keep it to 2 minutes. I don't know if I can keep it to 2 minutes, but I'll keep it brief. And one that I'll fast forward through is...
Josh, can you hear?
Yep.
Okay.
One that I'll fast forward to is, I reviewed the documents from all the other towns, just to kind of see what they were covering and what they weren't covering. And one of them that came up in particular was security, and which other towns have as part of the charter. And Bolton, I didn't see where it has it in the Bolton proper, but it has it in the school. So, thanks to Josh, I'll just leave my copy right here. I'm not gonna go into it. It's a state statute. It's pretty comprehensive for the school system, just for information purposes. One of the concerns I have in Bolton here, and I'm just going to briefly buzz through this, but I've been in Bolton all my life. I'm heavily into security. 28 years in the military, retired lieutenant colonel. Had my children are into security. My daughter went to Boston College, took self-defense for 4 years. She was there. My son is Army and self-defense. My wife is military, so I mean, just so you know where I'm coming from. So if I seem like I'm slanted, I am. And there's been, and when I first came here, back in 1953, I walked to school. I went to the school systems here in Bolton. Walked to school a mile to the bus stop and walked home. Everyone kept their doors open. Nobody locked their cars. Fast forward to 2020, everybody on my street's been broken into. And by the way, I'm going to say this right up front, the state police has been awesome. This is not here to criticize the state police, but it's just the amount of crime is unbelievable. Everybody's locking their doors, they're locking their cars. One woman didn't lock her car, somebody came and stole it. Brought it to Hartford, and it was found 2 weeks later by the police in a chop shop, they called it, and the only thing left was the frame.
So can you tie this all back, all into the charter for us?
Well, I'm suggesting that the bottom line is in one sentence, I can try to tie it back, is that this part here for the school has security in it for the school, but I don't, it's so detailed, I don't want to get into it.
Yeah.
But for the town, we need more security, in my opinion. And I looked in the town to find out if we had anything, And I found in the internet there that we have a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen that's got a safety portion, and it's got the building department kind of thing as one subcommittee. The problem is they hardly ever meet, and there's no minutes published that we could find. And I got a staff at the office, by the way, it wasn't me, we checked that, we couldn't find any minutes. Now, maybe that's because they're trying to keep it confidential, I don't know. So
what kind of provision are you thinking about for the charter regarding safety?
Well, I didn't have time to do this, but I would like to see what other towns are doing. But like on the schools, for instance, my assistant has 4 children, she's got a couple of them at Andover, and they have push-to-talk radios. Then when the kids get off the bus, they have the teachers have push-to-talk radios, and same thing at Ram High School. I went to talk to the superintendent of schools because I wanted to go over some of this, but I got cut short. She didn't have the time. She scheduled another meeting shortly afterwards, so I couldn't get into my other thing. But I have VHF radio, I'm not using 100 watt, and I was better radios systems. And
So you think that, are you suggesting that there should be some kind of a provision in the charter that mandates certain safety measures?
yes, it's similar to what they have at the high school, but I'm not even sure they're doing this in high school.
Okay.
I'm kind of like a, I didn't break do that. I had somebody in my office do research.
Did you say you've looked at other charters or not?
Yes, all of
And do other charters have safety provisions in them?
them, yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I've read them all, in just in Talbot County, because that was in a.
What are some, do you
Yeah,
remember
give
some of
that.
the town's charters
I
that you looked at?
don't, but I haven't.
Okay, well, that's okay.
I could send them to you, but I have a
Okay.
copy of all of them right here, but I'm not prepared to give you that. I could get back to you on that, no problem. But safety is my number one concern. It's gotten to the point where, in my opinion, it's out of control. I mean, if the state trooper, just give you one incident. I told them, I've had several incidents on my property. And one of them was stealing copper. So I called the state police about it. And he came over, talked to me, said, give me some details. I said, well, they're stealing copper off my tower site. He said, well, let me stay out here for 2 weeks, or on and off, not full time, of course, but in between where he's standing by waiting for something to happen. So he hadn't been there hardly any time, and all of a sudden this hitchhiker comes, or this walker comes back, walking by with his backpack on, walks right by his cruiser, and he opens his window. He says, excuse me, just 1 second, stand in front of my cruiser, empty your backpack. He empties his backpack full of copper. He gets it. The picture's worth 1,000 words. But I could give other stories just on my property, but it's happening. Kim Leventhal's been broken into 3 times, and she has a security system. And across the street, they've been broken into. I mean, all the way down the street. And this is not published, other than my assistant finds it on Facebook. That the pickup truck going around and checking all the cars to see which ones are unlocked. I mean, this is out of control. When I was growing up, we had none of this. And this has all happened within the last 10 years. In my opinion, it doesn't appear that people know about it.
So what we'll do is, we have a list of items that we're gonna review,
Right.
and we will add this to the list. And if you could email me a couple of charters
I can give you a couple,
that you looked at that have a safety provision
Right.
similar to what you're thinking of, we'll take a look at it.
Or we need to review, because when I went to the superintendent of schools, she said anything to do with safety, talk to Sandy Perra. So I haven't talked to her yet, but this just happened. But then I looked up what the school's supposed to do for safety, and I got this, state law.
Okay, good,
So,
well,
I
we'll
mean,
take a look at it,
So that's an example that I'm leaving for both,
okay.
so that's.
Well, okay. So that's great, that's a great comment, Milton, thank you for that. And we will add it to the list of things that we're gonna look at.
That's it.
Good, thank
A
you,
little over 2 minutes, but close.
thank you.
I didn't plan on staying for the rest of it, so
Okay,
no offense.
yeah, thank you for coming.
I'll call you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Give me a call.
So now I'd like to move on to the discussion with our guests, John Alcester and Mark Walter. Did you two talk beforehand to figure out who's gonna go first, or not? To-
So it's your choice.
John, why don't you go ahead?
So my understanding is you're looking at some of the differences between town manager, town administrator, and some of the duties. It's, in a lot of ways, they're more similar than different. A lot of it's title, and the standard format, we call it the council manager plan. That's because the council is always first. They are the policy people. So instead of having a first selectman, you have typically a council chair. And that's one of the issues that vary by town, but the model plan for the model council manager plan is that the elected council people choose the council chair. So it's not always a direct election. In Connecticut, they've been starting to stray that in some cases they may have the highest vote getter dictated by that. That can give you some issues in terms of highest vote getter may not be the best leader of a council. Because to be effective as a council leader, you have to respect everyone at the table. So a popular vote among the elected officials to choose their leader is often the preferred way in the model plan. Then other distinctions are it's the authority and power of a town manager can sometimes be a little bit more complete. And again, in the model plan, and there's actually a model charter out there that but under the model plan, the town manager is responsible for hiring all staff and all the staff reports to them. In our town, we've picked and chosen a few positions that while I hire everyone, certain positions specifically on the charter have to be then ratified by the council. For example, a police chief, and I absolutely concur with that. We have a couple others that are just kind of hangovers, like human services person needs to be ratified for whatever reason, and I think I know why. The person was very politically popular when they were drafting the charter, but there's a handful of positions. So mostly I hire everyone and just report those to the council. Conversely, we have a structured police department. And under our charter, the police chief hires the police officers and then needs my ratification. So I have access to their polygraph tests, their psychological profiles. So there's two of us, the police chief and myself, that can review all that data before we hire a police officer. So there's flexibility, I guess, is the answer of what you believe is appropriate. And while there's a model, models don't always work. National models don't always work well in New England. Because we have traditions and we have just the reality of the way we're used to doing business, and you have to look at that. That's important too. So other distinctions, I have called out responsibilities. The capital improvement plan, I am supposed to do that, period, and present it to the council. So, and the operating budget, I have to recommend a budget to them. So it's not as appropriate for them to say, I want you to give me a budget that's a 2% reduction or something like that. Clearly, it's a team approach, so it's naive that you don't listen and work as a team. But under the charter, it's quite clear that those fiscal responsibilities of what the preliminary recommended budget for both capital improvement and operating are the town manager's responsibility, that goes to the council. In our budget process, the department heads of the major departments, so not like the building department, but public works, fire, police. And then if there's a department that has something new or programmatically change or something like that, the council may ask them, but they can come in and we spend about a month going through and it allows some direct communication from the staff to the council over my budget proposal and their budget requests. So like the volunteer fire departments still have direct access to the council. I do a recommendation and then the council, and it's another input just like our annual budget public hearing where the public can come in, department heads also can come in and if invited by the council. So do that. I am the chief executive officer, so I am the one that signs all contracts to the town, not the first selectman. So I also, under our charter, and this is probably a little bit unique, I am the sole contact by charter with the town attorney. And that doesn't mean that I don't delegate some of those authority, like my town planner can talk to that, but part of that is to make sure that the attorney's position is not political, that it's not overused because we pay by the hour. So you want some controls to make sure that you're using the time wisely and not over-dependent.
Select the town attorney?
I do not. The council selects the town attorney. So a lot of those issues are still, the council selects the auditor, the council selects the town attorneys, and they select the town manager. So those are the key things.
Tax collector, town clerk.
No, the they're all town staff, they're all
Who hires them?
me,
Oh, they're correct.
or my office. And again, there's just a few handful of those that I have to get ratified. Police chief is the most predominant one. But as part of the team approach, I often share a lot of information. Email is great because I can just fire off things probably almost daily. And my standard with that is if somebody walks up to you in a grocery store and asks you a question, I want them to have the answer and not bias. So, speaking of security, last night we had 7-Eleven was armed robbery, and the car, 2 hours later, a car was stolen. We got into a police chase and called it off because it was a juvenile, and we didn't want them to crash, and the car was found in Wilmette 4 hours later. And I can tell you how we deal with security issues. Briefly, just side note, we have a committee that meets monthly with police, fire, EMS, school resource people. We don't have a school resource officer, but somebody from the school. 2 members of the town council, myself, and our fire EMS administrator, and our public works department. So we meet monthly on the first Thursday just to talk about security issues.
Or quarterly?
But versus having something like that in your charter, it's effective because it allows us to talk through everything from special events, fireworks, to road races, gets us in a room, talk about communications, radios, all those things. So,
But there's nothing in your charter?
nope.
Is there anything in your charter about security?
No, just that the first selectman town administrator shall have the well-being of the town as their,
Okay.
focus, which is pretty
Um,
basic. But no, most security procedures and policies are never written for the public, because we don't want the public to know all our protocols,
Oh.
because then they could use it.
the school stuff is actually
Great.
prohibited from disclosure.
Yes, you will never find a school security plan published.
You said all contracts. Where's the break line with the school system?
Not those. I have, and that's another distinction, I'm glad you brought it up. Some town managers actually have authority to cut the school budget. I do not. So town of Manchester can cut the school budget as part of their budget process. Tolland also can do that. I'm not a fan of that. It's effective from a political perspective that somebody else takes the pain. But I think it gets into policy issues that are inappropriate. That it gives the town manager too much authority over another elected board, and that's not really appropriate in my opinion. Again, different towns do that differently. I'm not a fan of having that authority, but I understand how some other elected council members like that, because somebody else does the dirty work for them. But I have a very, very good working relationship with our superintendent, and that will cause conflict to us on a daily basis. And I think it leads to lack of cooperation on things like our health insurance and school facilities maintenance and things like that. So yeah, every town has their own history and culture, but that's another issue that when you look into it, what type of powers you want to give the manager, and that again is one that some towns do.
Do you have a shared services agreement with the schools or not?
No.
Like maintenance or finance?
So we have separate finance departments. I am a fan of joint finance. We've just never gotten there, and partly is our elected officials have had trust issues over the year. So while staff,
Where don't they?
I know it works really well in some places, but it has to be based on a mutual agreeable solution, and I've seen it fail a couple places, but Mark can answer more on that because it's working well for in Columbia. But Mansfield's is the prototype that has been doing it for 45 years.
John, how much of your job is defined by the charter versus your contract? And for example, your term, hiring and review, who you report to, are those in your contract or the charter? How spelled out are they in the
So I
charter?
prefer the term employment agreement.
Yeah. Same.
My employment agreement is very broad. It's not a lot of detail in it. I am an undeterminate term, so that's another issue. So,
But the charter doesn't specify term?
No.
Or renewal or
No.
renewal periods or anything?
so that's another issue that we have.
So it's at the pleasure of the council?
At the pleasure of the council, any meeting that's called for the purpose to remove me, it takes 5 votes.
How many?
How many members on
5
the
out of
council?
7. 7 is by the way, my personal preference, I think 7 is the perfect number.
Why do you think that?
5 is just too small.
How many people in Coventry today?
12,500.
5, and,
When I
5
changed the form of government to council, originally town administrator, then they moved to town council, it was 6,500.
No finance board in your town, correct?
No.
And 5 is too small for 4,500 people?
I just think that having just even quorum issues. I just think that having a broader diversity, and especially if you don't have a finance, so let me tell you our format. So we have 7 council members. The town council then is broken into 2 subcommittees, which is not under charter, it's under their administrative procedures, which they adopt the night they're elected. But we have a committee, standing committee called Steering Liaison, and a finance committee. So the steering liaison meets, and they both meet one time a month, and the council meets 2 times a month. So except for all the council members basically have 3 meetings a month, and the chairman goes to all of them. So the chairman would be, or woman, would be 4 meetings a month. So the steering liaison is the group that does policy. So if we're looking at an ordinance or a citizen complaint that will take a little bit of time to look into, that somebody came to a council meeting and wants something to be looked at, steering would look at that. And they're also responsible for all committee appointments. So they actually have no authority to take action. They develop recommendations and then report to the council for action. So our finance committee receives and reviews the financial reports of both the town and the schools on a monthly basis. Our finance director gives them a monthly report. They're actively involved when we're looking at bonding issues to kind of oversee, because I have the authority basically, once we go through a town meeting to bond, then it's turned over for me and I have the authority to just followed through the whole process, but when we got into refinancing and we decided to do a negotiated sale versus a competitive sale, I kept them really closely in line because I wanted to, we picked a firm and then we had to negotiate a price. I wanted to make sure they felt very comfortable with that. So we actually had a council member getting all the paperwork until they said, stop, please stop sending stuff. It's complicated. I said, yeah, it is. So again, it's got to be a team approach. I've got to respect their wishes and anticipate their needs.
John, did you say that those two subcommittees are set by what?
Policy,
I mean,
council policy,
So it's not,
Oh,
Not
so-
charter.
not in the charter.
Not in charter, it's not an ordinance, it's not, it's
So,
just,
The
okay.
first meeting, when they're first elected, we have standing rules of procedure, and those call for that. And the chairperson has the authority to appoint who serves on what. And we still have to respect minority positions, so.
Is it three per committee?
3 per committee, and the council chair is a non-voting member, and if a member's not there, can serve as a substitute in as an ex officio voting member.
How do you handle that with quorum issues, if it's 4 people?
The chairman cannot vote, it's just an observing person, and cannot participate. And by the way, our quorum is 5 for our council.
Oh, you got,
so
We have
you have
7
7.
members, but a quorum is 5. It's strict.
And for the
that's very
subcommittees,
strange.
that's not applicable.
For the subcommittees, you have to have 2 members, 2 out of 3. But again, the council chair has the right to sit in if
Somebody's
one
missing.
person's missing.
What do these people get paid?
To 0.
Everybody,
You give them a coffee cup sometimes.
even the head of the council, the chair,
Nobody.
no money? And are you able to get good people to run all the time and to
It's very
continue
competitive.
service?
you're not.
It is competitive.
It's very competitive. I've never not had a full slate, and this last time I had a full slate and an independent.
And time consumption for these people?
A lot depends how much they want to get engaged right now. It's a lot. When we don't have big pressing issues, which for some reason we do right now, if you've been reading the paper, typical meeting, 7:30 to 9:30 or 10, right? A typical council meeting. The subcommittees are typically an hour and a half. So a lot depends on, the depth of the staff work that's done.
Do you live in town?
Yes.
You required to?
By contract, not by charter. And next on that, when I agreed to, my career, I was an assistant manager in Avon for 6 years and 3 years in after grad school, 3 years in Weathersfield as administrative assistant to the manager doing staff reports and annual reports, which I still do.
How many years in Coventry?
I'll be 32 in May.
Oh,
No.
that's a career.
Half of my life.
Yeah.
Where would we find those model,
I could send them to Gwen. There's a National Civic League.
Yeah, I think I've seen it. It's
Not-
online.
That's
That's
that's the organization I sent them.
yeah,
It's $175 for us to join for a year and we get all their publications for free.
Okay, I could just send you. But, again, I think you can just look at other charters and allow the things that are there. Again, Manchester's charter, it just uses the term general manager.
Yeah.
Because they go back so far they were one of the first in the state to do that. And the council manager plan was originally, ICMA, the city managers, was out of Chicago at that point, and it was a business. So you have a general manager and you have a board of directors.
It's probably written by the chief.
Good job.
the Kappa, I'm sorry, were you finished?
Go ahead.
No, when you said you were in charge of the capital improvement plan, so do you get input from the Board of Education? They have any?
Yeah, they submit their plan to me,
And then you make the final decision on
Yes.
what gets funded and what doesn't?
and how, and when. So,
So do they have a 5-year plan?
I give them the directions of what they have to give me. So I have a budget, I have a capital budget, worksheet, a manual.
Is it tied to anything in your capital budget? Like the mill rate, is it 1 mil? Like here, it's at 1
No.
mil, let's say.
No,
No.
you actually have a good thing in your budget with that guaranteed capital. So we're probably undercapitalized in terms of, I've been struggling like heck to get over $1 million of mill rate, which is a little more than 1 mil. Just to put it in perspective, our mills are about 900 right now. Actually, with free val, I finally get it. I got over $1 billion the last report that just finished up. So we don't have a specific thing, but we have other funds. We do have a capital non-recurring expenditures fund that we can get money, save money up for that to carry forward. And our capital
LoSiP
fund.
funds, obviously, you're chasing those as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, and LoSiP, I run that actually through my capital improvement budget.
Yeah.
So I've detailed where our next 5 years of LoSiP monies are gonna be targeted.
Got it.
And I guess on some steep grant monies, which by the way, they're coming out in about,
Those are done.
no, they're coming out,
For real?
for real. I got the call today. I predicted,
Is that the idea, get my tolls, you can have all the bonding, all the steep you want, break them up?
they already approved.
Don't hold your breath on any of that.
But they already approved, Steve, they already approved at a bond commission a couple of months ago.
They
So-
did, huh?
So those are coming out probably next Wednesday.
So you're gonna fund our bridge that we finally gave up and went federal on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I asked, they're not looking at the old applications, no
No, they're not.
applications. And on Wednesday, probably next week, they'll come out with a new guidelines.
Your budget goes to referendum or no?
Yeah, we do, didn't used to,
How long has that been taking?
1991.
So it's 20, 30 years.
Yeah, partly,
29.
and that was the last time we revised our charter, by the way.
Really? You haven't done it in 30 years?
They tried in 1994, it got voted down because there were dangerous things there that were never defined by the party that didn't want to change, and they've never gone back.
How often do you change the town attorney?
We're long-term, and in our town, it's never been political. Well, at least since I've been there, it may have been before.
Do you allow the town attorney to live in town?
We never discussed it,
Does the town attorney live in town?
no. We actually hire kind of a firm.
Yeah, so who do you hire?
We're now with Halloran and Sage, which is,
Yes.
did you get the phone call or reading my reads?
I didn't get that yet.
Yeah.
They're what, raising their rate, raises? Is that what you did? Yeah.
First time,
Big surprise.
They've had lower rates for.
they're $180 an hour right now, and they're going to 185 and then 200. So, but we were with Murtha Cleanup,
Yeah,
and they're partners in Murtha Cleanup. Before that, it was Mike Ziska who.
yeah, I know.
He- High
Michael
quality.
used to live in this town.
Mike used to live here.
Right.
Yeah.
Before he did CPTV.
Before he did
Yeah.
CPTV.
Before he was famous.
For the,
Awesome attorney, and
Well, he's retired now.
he's off council,
Oh, yeah,
but
that's a fancy way of saying,
he actually, I'm sorry, he now works for Halloran and Sage.
yes, I know that. He left Martha and
Yeah.
became, right.
Um,
But he's still only of council with Howard.
yes,
He's not,
but we never lost a case with Mike.
that's good.
But Murtha was forcing them to raise the rates about 300, so we went out and took RFP for attorney services, and the council picked Halloran and Sage. Some towns, it's a political perk, it just never has been in our town, and partly because we don't have a lot of local attorneys that have made it easier, but you want sound legal advice, and with Halloran and Sage, we have about 4 attorneys that we use, depending what it is. So we have one that specializes in planning and zoning work, one that specializes in general work, one that's in litigation, and one where you get into, that got awful construction lawsuits. So you have a depth of knowledge that we pay the same price depending on who's doing it. And it just allows us to have the specialists that you need, that no one attorney has all those skill sets. So I like it. When we were with Murtha, it was fine. Way back, when I was first hired, we had an attorney out of Rockville, Abbott Schwebel.
I remember having, sure.
Abbott was
Piece of work.
yeah.
Yeah.
And some people would say you have rulings of expediency. And there are times you need that. We had a constitutional charter crisis where one party refused to show up at meetings, so they could never get a quorum. And one party quit, so they actually had to appoint somebody, the manager at that point, thank God I wasn't there, had to appoint a temporary council members just to get a quorum. And it's like nothing legal about it, but they had to come forward with a way and then step down immediately once they got somebody in. So it was kind of like, and I think the rationale was when a new council gets elected, I call the new council to order and call for nominations. So for that 1 minute, I'm in charge of everything, or the position's in charge of everything, because somebody has to.
Yeah, I wouldn't press that one too hard.
So that was the expediency, that they had to do it when you got elected, so.
With your security group that you mentioned a moment ago, or commission, or whatever, however you refer to it, I don't need the technicalities of it. You mentioned that there was at least one, maybe two members from the school?
The school has a representative and they choose who to go. Right now, it's the school facilities unit head.
So it's not a BOE member?
No, it could be.
Has it ever been?
No. It's more operational.
Got it. In regard to your employment contract, do you give an annual review?
Yes,
Okay.
I have a very formal,
But there's no renewal of your contract at that point in time. It's just kind of
that's
goes-
more on, do I deserve a pay raise or not?
Well, right, or how you doing.
The feedback's important.
Sure.
You know, so, had various, very complex 32-page SurveyMonkey evaluations down to a page and a half kind of reviews. Every council gets to determine their own process for evaluation.
So is the provision for evaluation of you in the charter or in your employment agreement?
Probably mentioned in my employment agreement, I haven't looked at it in a while.
It's not in the charter as
No.
such.
And that review the results are public, correct?
After it's voted
After
on.
it's done.
Okay.
So it's executive session.
Yeah, of course.
Material while it's being discussed, and then the council chair and myself will have to sign it, and at that point it becomes public.
Yeah, it has to be after once you're.
So John, I have a couple questions for you, and then Jim. First, there's one member missing tonight, Eleanor Georges, and she asked me to pose this question to both of you. So she presented this scenario. She would like to hear from both of you. If a resident comes to you saying, there's a tree down on the town the town's property extends somewhat into my front yard, and there's a tree that has fallen on the town's property. What are you gonna do about it?
Call the tree warden.
Okay, and what would you say, Mark?
Well, tree warden, who is a public works member, and so the public works director and tree warden would act.
So would you call the tree warden, or would you tell her to call?
I will call.
Oh,
You would call.
Yeah, and our public works director and my superintendent of operations are both tree wardens. They're certified tree wardens, so one of those two would go.
I
And then
have
let's say-
a foreman and a public works employee who are our tree wardens. And my administrative assistant, my executive assistant, would immediately make the call when she gets the call from the person. She wouldn't even wait to tell me.
Okay.
Yeah,
And let's
You
say
have to
like
act on that fast.
some snowplow plows over your mailbox, and the resident comes and is livid. This is the third time this winter.
You know, you only get people angry if you don't deal with their complaints.
Public works director.
So there are times where the direct dialogue is important, because you've got to get more dialogue. So there are times where you may refer them, but you listen to them, you take the complaint and then say, do you mind calling? Just because sometimes, you know, they need to set up an appointment to go meet somebody, you know, it's like having those three-party conversations doesn't always work. But you take the complaint and then you see how to best handle it.
Let us vent.
And that's the way you would handle it too? Okay.
And well, same thing, a lot of times you have to look, if the mailbox, you see the post and it's 80 years old and blown over with a toothpick, or if the public works plow hits the mailbox and we're replacing it.
Yeah.
But if snow hit it and it just fell over, then we'll say, you know, sorry.
So both of you, though, you would immediately respond to these public, okay. And,
And I don't, any walk-ins I try to take it unless I'm into something.
I do too.
I don't.
If I can see someone, I'll immediately invite them in my office and talk to them.
and then, question for you, John, and you have to be candid as much as you want to be. And you 32 years, you have dealt with, you go to those cost meetings, and you go to meetings all the time, and you're always dealing with town managers, you're often dealing with first selectmen. Do you have an opinion, basically, on the quality of person that you've seen that are town managers versus the quality of people that are, and I'm not talking about personal traits, I mean, you know, how they fit the role, how they can execute the role. Is there a difference, is there a difference between what you see in first selectmen versus town managers?
I think the safest thing to say is that there were more differences in the past than there are now. And I think part of that is there's a broader awareness, so, you know, I drank the blood and the Kool-Aid of being a town manager. I mean, I went to grad school for it. It's what I wanted to do. I changed jobs from Weathersfield to go to work for Phil Shank, who was one of the leading managers in the state in Avon, so I could mentor under him. Those opportunities are not as prevalent now. So there are more people that are having to learn a little bit more under fire. So, and when I was at Avon, the manager was also in the National Guard. So like he disappeared in Germany for 5 or 6 months. So I got a lot of learning curve there with the good staff. So I don't think you can make generalizations. I think that there are some first selectmen that are very good, and Mark was a first selectman, and changed over to the non-elected side of life. And then there are other first selectmen and mayors that shouldn't be in the job. So, I think there's a distinction between being able to run a good campaign and running a town well. And I don't think there's a universal line.
Okay.
A universal line, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
I don't think you can make just absolute. I think a person that has an MPA has a certain master's degree in public administration, has a certain skill set, but I don't think it's an exclusive skill set. But I hate this. I hate to think that. I think back on some of the theories that I had from grad school, and, lessons I learned from Ruckelshaus house. It's like, but I still knew about speed of change. And how fast you can do change and when the opportunities are for change. But I still think about some of those seminars and workshops and classes, which like boggles my mind. And one day I had to go through and do a statistical analysis and pulled out my old textbook on figuring out Yule's Q on probability. It's like, am I really doing this?
I would.
So I mean, it just depends. And again, with today's internet and with the technical resources, financial advisors and so forth, if you're soft on something, you just got to know who to ask and not be embarrassed to ask for help.
So let's finish up our questions for John, and then I want to move on to Mark, okay?
Right.
So
Well, this one maybe we
and then
get
you had a question.
both of you. Could either of you comment on how a town that has a town manager versus a town that doesn't can do kind of long-range economic development planning or stimulus? And I don't mean necessarily subsidies or anything. I just mean, how do you get any kind of momentum going forward to get economic development in your town if you don't have somebody who's there on a sustained basis as a professional, as a town, in other words, as a manager or an
It's a lot
administrator?
harder. I mean, if you've driven through our village area,
Yeah.
and seen the renovations there,
Yeah.
that was a 25-year project.
Right, and you
And I almost lost that 4 or 5 times, and I had to know the people to save it. Connecticut DOT canceled it. And I went over the head to the federal government who had funded the initial studies and got them to send a letter to DOT saying, okay, we want $1 million back that you spent on design fees already. And all of a sudden the project was back on. And then I conceded, okay, why don't we shorten it up because you got a budget to deal with. So, you know, you build long-term relationships with agencies and people, and to be successful in that. And I can't say that, you know, I think we've done okay in economic development, but, you know, we're not the glowing star in that. And that's based on, I don't have a highway exit ramp. I don't have adequate sewers and public water. I don't have hydrants. And
DP didn't think you needed that.
no, and Bolton knows that.
We know all about those things.
We want to give you our crap.
Right.
And Manchester wants it too. So it's not done. Actually, they just
Both write
introduced,
books.
they just introduced a bill today to legislate that Bolton Lake Sewer Authority, Senator Champagne just introduced a bill to basically take that authority away from DEP.
Good.
So,
You had to, it's a disgrace what they did.
It's-
And we don't wanna get into that
Yeah.
tonight.
We'll get
Especially
angry.
now.
but to answer your question, I think a lot of things have long-term things.
Yeah.
I mean, just, we're doing an amazingly complex project right now to build a microgrid. We got a $4 million grant. It's gonna tie our high school, middle school, town hall, 80 units of elderly housing, our police station, fire station into a microgrid. $4 million. We'll disconnect, but we took it one step further, and we're gonna use combined heat power facilities at our high school to generate our own electricity at below market rates. So even when we're not off-grid, we're gonna be generating our own electricity with natural gas that I brought into town from Manchester. And the senior centers, well, the senior housing, 80 units will have solar and batteries. And very complex, and the financial model on that is overwhelming. And we're not quite there yet. We're like moving along, but it's like, it allows you to look at those long-term things. And we went out to an RFP for vendors to do this, so it'll be a power purchase agreement, so really no cash on our part, but just buy electricity for the next 20 years. But we got the last of those grants, and part of that is the difference between just an elected person who may come and go out is these long-term relationships. I mean, you know, I've got, you know, kind of 8 huge grant programs going on now. I've got 3 LOTSIP. I'm getting a free bridge out of LOTSIP. I'm getting a 80% bridge with Columbia. And I just finished up another state local bridge program project 4 months ago. And I've got 2 other, $3 million of other projects through the LOTSIP program. This $4 million microgrid, we finished up a $800,000 renovation to our elderly housing. I mean, we just got grants, and all of those are huge time commitments and work. Closing out a safe route, I've got sidewalks in front of the town hall. Those are 5 different grants. Going back.
Those are things that it's harder for a 2-year select person or
Right.
even a
And
four-year
to make
mayor
sure that
to
you
do
don't
with this.
screw them up and lose the reimbursement on them is
I
different.
don't know, Mark, if you
Jim,
agree with it, but
What did
I'm
you
sorry.
had a
Yes, I
question?
did. I had 2 questions for you. What we've seen over the past 10 years, maybe even longer, is that the state budget's been growing by a reasonable clip, but the funding from the state budget to the towns has been getting decimated. Funding for roads, ECS grants, the whole spectrum, it's been really, a lot of them just been wiped out. But what's been surprising is how quiet the voices at the town level have been regarding the state money and their. I know CCM's voice is becoming stronger, but in your town, in terms of trying to get state money to the town to grow, would that be more your job or would that be the council's job? And how do you try to address this disparity with what's going on in the state budget versus what they're doing for towns?
Okay, so I think there's some economic reality. The state is broke. And until they decide they're gonna raise revenues, which, they're not gonna do tolls now, that we're gonna stay broke. So those grants, those funding at ECS, I know for the next 7 years, I'm gonna lose $300,000 a year. So I'm building that into my financial models. So when we start looking at our long-term staffing plan, this sounds like I'm bragging and so forth, but when I was hired, the town of Coventry had 65 employees. 31 years later, I have 67 employees. So, and we weren't operating a senior center. We weren't operating a rec program. So I had a part-time, the high school coach was a part-time rec director when I got there. Now I have a full-service rec program with summer camp programs and everything else. So reallocated resources.
But what's perplexing to me is the state budget has been growing by a reasonable clip.
Actually, no. You gotta, they have added programs that have cost a lot of money. But if you look at the number of employees, they're down 20%. They're down to
It's debt is what's going on.
No, but what I'm saying, the overall
debt-
state budget.
Yeah, and it's debt payments because they've used the credit card.
Pension.
But they're down to the number of employees they had in 1980
Versus debt.
with whole new divisions. So there's finding an employee that's still working there and just wait 2 more years, another 25% of the employees are all gonna retire.
They have to lock in the benefit plans.
So everyone can pick on the state and a lot of it was they just didn't fund their pension plans. They were negligent. And, our pension plan is about 80% funded. At one point, it was a lot lower than that. And we developed a long-term strategy on how we were gonna get it back up. So you can't do these things.
I think the state's at 49%.
Depends on the plan. The teachers
Teachers.
are bad. With the tier 4 employees, the new employees, they're fully funded.
Yeah, they didn't get anything though.
They're fully funded. Of course they're fully funded, there's no in the fund.
But
Easy to fund nothing.
That's how it's fully funded after.
so, the reality is,
Agree to it.
until the state decides they want to restructure things,
Yeah.
they're not going to do anything. And I served on a tax panel, which got it's 5 months of my life, and it's sitting in a stack of books like that.
Is that the Moore Commission
No, the tax panel.
for
No, it's not.
CCM or
No, the state tax.
the state?
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Jim?
I appreciate the answer though, but it's,
So
what I'm saying is the state has problems and they have structural problems. But if the budget's growing by a certain percentage, you're getting a zero, but they're spending more.
I'm getting less than zero. So to answer your question, which is really about who represents the town.
That's right, versus the state.
So I go up there and do lobby. I also lobby personally because I know the players. So I have influence. When they wanted to, again, it sounds like I'm bragging, but part of this is just tenure, believe me. When they were trying to transfer the teacher pension to us, I prepared a graphic that showed what it was going to do to us over the years. I felt like I was Ross Perot with his charts. But that chart was very effective. And Keith Faniff, who is the wizard of what's really happening in the state,
Yeah, he's excellent.
came up to me and said, your chart made the difference and that made it go away. So I take that as a compliment from him. But they needed the graphical representation of what this was going to do long-term to towns. So right now it's dead for now. After an election year, who knows what's coming back. But they haven't structurally changed the teacher's pension plan, the other plans they have. So that 65 billion problem is just gonna keep compounding. So I don't think the state hasn't recognized that it broke yet.
But the bottom line is, you as town administrator, you're probably doing more than the council is to try to address some of these issues at the state level in your system of
When I
government.
need them, they'll be there. So there are times Again, they work during the days too.
That's right.
But there are times where the council chair will come and testify on something.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah,
Yes, go ahead.
Mine are all the dumb questions.
No, they are not. It's no such thing.
How important is the nomenclature of administrator versus manager? And I have a reason I'm asking it is because 30 years ago, Coventry hired a manager. 30 years ago, Bolton hired an administrator. And I think we had different experiences. Does that have anything to do with it or what? I guess, so one, is the title important? Is the structure of how the job is created important? Is the personality of the person who does it? Is oversight, accountability important? What do you
All of the
think?
above.
How could we sort of compare a rich dad, poor dad here?
Okay, so, the title of town manager will open a broader pool of candidates to apply. And again, as I said, the differences between a town administrator and town manager are narrowing dramatically. There are some places that have a town administrator that answers only to the first select person. So that's again how it's structured. Your history here isn't that. They serve the whole board.
Maybe on paper maybe, but that was part of the problem.
On paper. So I think it opens up a broader national pool that other people may not know what a town administrator's duties and responsibilities. But I think it's the charter, the duties that matter more than the title. As I said, in
Yeah.
Manchester, the general manager, when they recruited Scott Shanley, and he knew it was a town manager, they just called it something else. And in other places, like Massachusetts, they sometimes use the term secretary. Going back to historically, it's Massachusetts, they have all these colloquial terms, but the town secretary. So it's just easier, it's universally more accepted, but it's really the duties.
What about selectman versus council? Because I think, did Simsbury go to selectman manager or something
Yeah.
like that, which is kind of just the same thing, only they call it selectman.
We don't want to follow that example up there.
But the manager there has strong authority.
Yeah, but does the nomenclature of selectman or council, does that matter? No.
Does being designated chief executive officer of
Yes.
the town matters a lot?
That matters.
I take it.
That matters.
Because that gives you the ability to sign contracts,
Yeah.
sign deeds.
I have one more silly question. So you've been at it for 30 years there, with no charter changes. If you had charter changes that would make your job easier or more effective, what would you pick? Or harder?
Yeah.
You know, what could happen?
We have actually some calendar dates in our charter that don't work, so I have to just say, legal date, recommended date, and every once in a while, the Board of Ed says, well, under charter, I have this date. No, everything else falls apart. I can't get a budget legally advertised if you give it to me by that date. So we actually have some structural things that we have to, again, have agreement on that we're gonna ignore. But our charter is pretty thin. It's not huge, and I think just a couple things that are in there that to change. We have a limit of council can take out a fund balance throughout the year if they need to, but it's limited to up to $100,000. After that, we have to go to a town meeting. Now, $100,000 in the 80s when that was put into the charter doesn't, and what you could buy today doesn't matter. So I could easily have to call a special town meeting just to buy salt if we have that type of winter. So that's
We have an
problematic.
interesting way of dealing with that in the town poll. We just take out 100 this week and 100 next week and then 100 following.
Yeah, don't like doing that. Don't like doing those workarounds. Calling a special town meeting is not the end of the world. We can do it in 10 days. I am torn on the whole budget referendum thing. I think the turnout is so low typically that I don't know it's representative.
What do you get normally for a percentage?
On a turnout?
Yeah.
For a town meeting for the budget, probably 100 people. And we're a 5,600
Right.
population town.
Right.
For a open space purchase, 150 people. And for a normal town meeting for business, 8 people.
50,
And your referendum percentage of voters?
It can be 12 to 18%.
How many referendums usually?
We've been on a good streak. Partly we've had extremely low increases, if at all. So we haven't had it's been about 5 years since we had 2 referendums. But we had the year where we had 5. I don't want to relive that.
I could give you my opinion on referendums if you like.
Yeah, I think it's time to move on to Mark now, okay?
Yeah,
So,
good.
thank you, John, that was fabulous. Mark, we'd love to hear whatever you have to say, and you can start with referendum.
Well, when I
if you'd like to.
did 10 years as a first selectman in East Hampton. So that was 5 terms where it's small town state statute, no charter. I was the chief executive officer, chief elected official, and chief of police, elected chief of police. And
Get a sign gun.
I had to do everything.
So, because there was no police department?
Right.
I had a police department. I had a resident state trooper, and then I hired 4 full-time policemen because we used to have 2 resident troopers, but we have 3 lakes and the summer population explodes in East Hampton. So we're normally 10,000 people, and then it really gets crazy in the summer. So I went from a constabulary to full-time officers with one resident trooper. So I had a lot of responsibility as the elected chief of police. We would meet constantly on police issues.
Did you get paid by the police department as well as the town?
No, I only got paid as the first selectman.
Do you mind me asking what that was?
I started at about 55,000 back in 2007.
Yeah.
By the time I left, it was about 78,000. And
Was there an administrative officer?
I was there
You were, okay,
with a 3-man, but I and 2 other selectmen ran the whole town.
okay.
So the advantage of that was I only needed my majority party selectman and I to decide. I knew the outcome of every meeting. I never went into a meeting not knowing what was going to happen. So, but we worked with the minority party all the time, and we had very successful meetings. It was never contentious.
Was it the 3 of you all the way through the 10-year term?
No,
Okay,
it was myself, but we would be different
Yeah.
selectmen.
I got
Would come and go. And they were not, they got a small stipend, just,
a few thousand.
I think it was 3,000.
And was that full-time for you?
Yes,
typically? Yeah.
full-time for me. And when I came in, my party wanted referendums. So we went to referendums all the time. What I've noticed with referendums, with social media becoming such a possible weapon, is that the misinformation that can go out on social media can skew a referendum unbelievably. Where in a town meeting, you have a presentation, you have question and answers, and the people that are voting, I think, have a better understanding of what they're voting on. What I've seen with the referendum, it can be used as an evil weapon. I had a grant, a steep grant, over 400,000 to create a incubator community farm for the town to actually allow small farmers to get product to market. The farming community came out against it and convinced the town this was going to be an industrial complex that would ruin the town. And they had a forced referendum to return the money. So it's unbelievable how
Wow.
Facebook can really skew what's really going on. So that's just my side. In Columbia, we have town meetings. We only have referendums when it gets over a $500,000 purchase.
So your budget does not go to referendum?
It goes to town meeting.
Town meeting,
Could it be petition or referendum?
yes, it can be petitioned to referendum.
What's your current town budget? It's,
About 19 million. So 4 million on the town side.
Can the budget be increased if the town meeting rejects it? Because what if
If
it
the town
rejects it,
meeting
it's too low?
rejects it, I doubt it would be increased.
But could it, be, as opposed to
It
not?
can be reduced at the town meeting, it can't be increased at the town meeting. So you'd have to have another town meeting if it went down.
Ours can't be increased at the town meeting.
But it can be reduced.
have you ever seen a town that can increase it? Either one of you?
No.
You're talking at the town meeting.
I don't
So-
mean at the
So if
town
it
meeting,
fails a
if
referendum,
it fails,
can it,
Can
and
it
you
be-
you rejigger it can go up.
Yes.
There's-
Yes.
You're not,
No, anything can happen
Yeah.
when you come
we've
back.
got a
to the
provision in
slate
the charter, it
and-
can only go down. for
yeah, we have a
subsequent
charter
referendum.
that says it can only go down,
No, that,
which doesn't.
I mean,
It might reject because
politically,
it's
I've never
low
seen us
already.
try to go back up because the
Yeah, that's
the
not-
failure is, it's like, oh, it's too low. It's like, lower.
So Mark, what made you decide to move from a first selectman position into the town?
when I won my 5th election and the 4th and 5th were both primaried by my own party, my wife said, why don't you go get a job where you're an employee? So what got crazy was the politics. And I'm normally a pretty non-political guy, but in a sense. What I couldn't stand was, here you do a good job, the town really likes the job you're doing, but a few members of your party feel that they have earned the right to be the first selectman. So they run against you and nobody turns up in primaries. So I would win by 8 votes. And all my friends would go, God, I can't believe I should have voted. But it gets tough when that's your career, that you're that vulnerable to losing your job in a primary. And what got old too was that my party would be ultra conservative against many things that I thought were good and wanted me to be as ultra conservative as they were. And I'd say, no, it's not what the town wants. I'm gonna run the town the way I believe the majority of the town will vote and want. So it wasn't fun to go to the town committee meetings and get beat up over a lot of the, literally the budget you're in charge of is not, the debt, the capital, the Board of Ed budget, though, that's the budget. What you're in charge of is a very small percentage of the budget.
15%.
Right. So I have a MBA and a finance and accounting background, and that's another requirement to be a town manager, either an MBA normally or a master's in public administration like John went through. So I felt qualified. The challenge of moving from a first selectman to a town manager is a lot of times the towns fear you'll be too political because you're coming from an elected first selectman position. But I feel it was a great transition. I think the form of government I'm in now is a better way to run a town.
Why?
The way you are with Columbia.
That's what we want to hear that. Will you expand on that?
So we have a 5-person Board of Selectmen. One of those 5 is the first selectman through elections. And the first selectman is the chief executive officer of the town. I'm the chief administrative officer of the town. So he does have first right of signing all contracts. Whenever we have a major contract to be signed at the Board of Selectmen meeting, I usually add to the motion, Stephen Everett, who is our first selectman, is authorized to sign the contract, or the town administrator in his absence. So usually the board will give me the authority to sign the contract if Steve's not around or, because usually I'm the one negotiating the contracts.
So, but you have to have that
I have
authority
to have,
specifically
through the
delegated
board,
to you.
the right to sign the contract. So that's one big difference between John and myself.
Yeah, just to be clear, a lot of those contracts, I have the council approve it anyway.
I do too. I run
So
everything
I'm not just signing
by
stuff,
the board.
but some small things that are already in a budget, if it's in the budget, I have the authority to spend it. So if it's like a contract for floor mats, cleaning, I'm not bringing that to a council meeting.
You're right. I don't either. For all the little stuff, I just execute it. It's the big contracts. I'm in charge of all the employees implementing all the policies of the board, reporting to the board, setting the agenda with the first selectman. You know, the main power of the first selectman is setting the agenda.
You hire all the employees?
I hire with the approval of the board. So I do all the interviews, I come with a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and they give me the authority to hire, and they authorize the wage and the contract that I've negotiated. They also approve any changes to any job descriptions. They have final say in.
Ours has to do job descriptions too.
What they gave me the authority,
Council?
Council.
Okay.
they asked me to please not bring seasonal or part-time employee issues to them anymore. So they,
Employee issues?
anything to do with part-time or seasonal employees, they've given me the full authority to do everything. Which is fine, because that's usually,
How divided is your board of selectmen typically? Like, are they usually unanimous on things?
Yes.
Because if it's not that way, I can see how that could be.
they're typically, I've been there now, this is my 4th year, and they get along great. Now, they are not always unanimous on votes. Some have hardcore beliefs for or against certain issues that come up with the town, and they stick to their guns. But for the most part, it's a one-person outlier of the 5-man board. And we tend to, we have better luck getting quorums than some of my, like Board of Finance, which we call 5-pack in Columbia. They have a 7-man board. They tend to have more trouble getting a quorum than the 5-man board. Something, I don't know why. We had to cancel a meeting last night. But the, I like the administrative and the leadership role I have, but I appreciate not having to worry about the politics of making decisions. Because the board, I'll make my recommendation and they decide what to do and they set my direction and that's what I execute. And they don't have a residency requirement in Columbia. Because I live in East Haddam, it's only, 10 miles away. So it's not a big commute at all, it's actually a very nice commute.
If I can, because the question came up and I didn't answer it in terms of, I answered that I don't have it, I have it in my contract. I don't think that a residency requirement is good anymore.
Right, I don't either.
And the real reason is that the reality of family life is that you have 2 income families. So you're requiring the spouse to basically move. And that may mean give up their job.
And kids might be in the school system and everything's wonderful and the sports teams and for you, like I considered East Hampton, but knowing that they were going to meet a town manager, but they had a residency requirement. I'm not moving 3 miles just to change my job.
So I think a
that'd be
reasonable
silly.
distance for emergency, I think reasonable expectations of community involvement, whether it's,
Right.
show up at a Rotary Club meeting or some of those things. But the simple thing is, do you require your superintendent, who's taking 75% of your money, to live in town? The answer is no.
Right.
So why should a town manager be there? I agreed to it because I was single at that time. It didn't matter to me. But I have, one of the reasons I stayed there is my wife wasn't gonna move. She lives next to her mother on a family farm she grew up to, and that was just, she had a son when we got married, and age differences, it was that schooling thing. So the opportunities were, part of the reason I'm there for longevity is that, I didn't get fired, and they seem to generally think I do an okay job, depending who you ask, but,
So you got a job in Coventry and found a wife?
yes.
Right, and she locked him in.
And then he gets,
So,
So Mark, is there anything that you feel as a town administrator you cannot do but you could do if you were a town manager?
Well, the town manager, John is correct. In the country, if you're advertising for the position, town manager is clearly understood what a town manager is. when we go off and have all these other side names for things, town administrator and many other things we talked about, it's not quite as clear. And I talked to Carmen Vance, who was our first selectman before Stephen Everett now, and she said back when they did the charter and they were going to go to this form of government, they felt town manager was too hard to sell with the perception of too much power. So they dropped it to a town administrator, thinking, all right, gang, he's only administrating, don't worry. We'll still have a first selectman who will be ultimately in charge of policy and set direction.
How much of your job is defined by the charter versus what's in your?
Just like John said, the charter is a couple paragraphs, so
So
it
not a
basically
lot.
says, run things and report to the board.
But like the charter doesn't say that you don't have the power to hire, or it doesn't say.
It is, the town manager is responsible to work under the general direction of the first selectman and the board of selectmen. He or she is responsible for the administration of all town departments, agencies, except the Board of Ed. He or she shall coordinate and administration of the office, the boards, the commissions, the agencies, and authorities of the town appointed by the Board of Selectmen, except those functions reserved or delegated to such bodies as the law of the charter. And then I also have the duties conferred by the charter to the chief administrative officer and as determined time to time by the Board of Selectmen. And then it goes into some basic things
So it's the board as a whole that delegates, not
Yes.
not the first selectman.
correct. But the relationship, because the first selectman has an office across from my office, and like John keeps his counsel abreast of everything, I keep my first selectman daily tuned to everything, and then the board to just the big things.
But that first selectman is not a full-time.
Not a full-time, but it has a stipend, I think it's about 17,000. And the first selectman goes to more of the functions than I do. He'll go to the Eagle Scout ceremonies, the ribbon cuttings, the things I would do as a first selectman, because I used to go to everything as a first selectman. Here I go to boards and commission meetings that are important due to an issue, like planning and zoning, because we're doing something critical, or wetlands, because there's a big discussion and I want to hear what's happening. But I don't go to as many things as I used to as a
Do you find that
First-
not being the chief executive officer hampers you in anything that you would want to be able to do?
No.
Or any kind of economic development situation, or?
No, the challenge, it's funny, in East Haddam, we had the luxury of hiring an economic development coordinator. And it actually we shared it with Haddam, town across the river. And because we didn't have a whole lot of business, it was critical for the businesses we had to have good representation. So we had an economic development committee that was very represented the businesses at all boards and commission meetings that could affect the business. And then they were instrumental in helping me put through tax abatement programs. And what was a program where you could, through the state, a major like solar project could be paid for through your taxes, through the town taxes, which gave them better, it has a name, but anyway. They were instrumental in implementing a lot of things to help the businesses that we had, keep them from leaving East Haddam. In Columbia, I can't get an economic development commission going. I don't know why, because I have a higher percentage of business in Columbia. Maybe because they're not having trouble. And it's surprising that I don't have as much business focus in Columbia as I did in East Haddam.
Is that commission, Economic Development Commission, a separate commission that you appoint people to, or is that
Yes.
a commission under the board? Oh,
Under the
not-
Board of Selectmen.
Is it part of Board of Selectmen members?
Well, we do have a Board of Selectmen member that has volunteered to be on this Economic Development Commission. So it couldn't be the first, but one of
This
the.
is not one of your subcommittees of the selectmen.
No, it's an appointed committee by the Board of Selectmen.
And do you draft your budget?
Yeah, so I draft the town budget with all my directors and the capital budget. Board of Ed drafts their budget. And then I present to the Board of Selectmen. They vote on a budget and then we send it to FIPAC and it's their budget. And the Board of Ed sends it to FIPAC.
How long is your contract for?
3 years.
And who does the reviews?
The first selectman and then we both do a review, then we bring it to the council, and the council,
How frequently?
or to the board, annually.
Annually.
Right.
But
But,
you pay your raises dependent on that.
but mainly the raises, I really get a major adjustment at the time of the contract every 3 years, but COLA along with all the other employees
Sure.
on the other 2 years. It just,
Well, Mark, I want to make sure I was clear on what the piece that you just said there. You do a self-evaluation?
yes, so what I do is I mainly put together a list of everything I accomplished.
Right.
And from that list of accomplishments, I have a meeting with the first selectman and we decide, you know, did I hit everything he wanted? Because he gives me a list of what he wants accomplished too. So we work together. And then we bring it to the board and the board, basically, unless there's a problem, it's not that hard of a.
And it comes up in the review.
Right, if they're looking to get rid of me, then there's gonna be a lot more discussion.
Yeah.
And it does take 4 of the 5 board members to fire me, or they could just let my contract expire.
Oh, okay.
So
Do you
is,
go
But you have
through-
a 3-year contract.
Right,
Do you go through that same process or similar?
So the council sets goals, and I get evaluated against those goals. So it's a whole council, not just the first selectman.
You don't do a self-evaluation
I do,
to present.
we have a discussion, and depending on what they want, and as I said, every council has a kind of different system they want to put in. So there have been times where I've written up the self-evaluation, other times I haven't. But I also, every 5 years, do something called the 360 evaluation, where it goes beyond just the council. And I go through University of Georgia, and it's an online service where I have the council members, my department heads, and then other community members.
they must hate doing that.
Hey, you know, it takes about 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's all 45 minutes, it's painful,
But,
hundreds of questions.
but what it does is it meets the whole target thing, so that comes only to me to look at. So I can do introspection of areas where am I doing what I think I'm doing, or is it being perceived differently? So there's an expense to that, but every 5 years I do that. And that's actually required by, I'm a credentialed manager, that's required, as well as doing annual learning.
I'm not credentialed.
and Mark, is your review, after your review is done and the board accepts it, is it then made public?
No, we've never done that, but it could be FOI.
Okay.
If anybody, we just have not done that for whatever reason.
I mean, we're not putting it up on our webpage.
No, but I mean, I always read in Manchester, you know, after the fact that, you know, whatever, and Glastonbury as well.
That's
There's-
where it
There's
is.
always an
Tradition.
article about the reviews.
Yeah,
that
the
have been
JI
done.
loves it.
Yeah. Okay, so does anybody else have questions for Mark? Because we have to
I just wanna ask one.
have other business.
So if there's personnel issues, okay, I just was wondering about the differences between your jobs and dealing with those. And a lot of times it doesn't mean termination, it means corrective action of the employee or something like that. If you could just offer some comments about how you deal with those type of things.
So with the authority to hire, I also have the authority to fire. So if I fire someone, the appeal,
That goes to the council, it's through you.
if I fire somebody, the appeal could be to the council. The reality is that I only have 8 non-union employees. So under collective bargaining agreements, the appeal is to the state, to labor board, because they're union members. So there's really 8 employees that could appeal a termination to the council.
I'm glad I
And that's in
haven't,
our charter.
I'm glad I haven't had to tag one of your cases.
You may soon.
And
Now I may have to recuse
So
myself.
it's, I'm not familiar with the particulars, but it's more cumbersome process in the public sector if there's an employee with issues, and how to navigate that.
You have to do progressive discipline. I mean, it's a fair and reasonable approach
Okay.
to allow a warning, correction. I mean, it's the whole process.
It's more through,
Follow the contract.
it's more through your department than the elected officials.
The council would not be involved in any of that.
And the same with you, Mark?
In East Haddam, I had 5 unions, but it was mostly a result of a elected first selectman that basically fired everybody and accepted applications for reemployment, which immediately triggered everyone to unionize. It was horrible. Columbia, I was hired with one union and it dissolved and I have no unions now, which is a lot easier. So that I'm in charge of progressive discipline and working out plans and keeping everybody working together, and it's working fine. If I feel I need to involve the first selectman, I'll bring him up to speed on an issue and what's going on, just so he's tuned in. But to hire or fire, I'd have to go to the board and present my recommendations and where I think we are. But I involve a labor attorney in every step of the way. I don't ever think I could get in trouble, because it's a complicated
But
process.
do you find it cumbersome to have to go to the board to terminate an employee?
No, because it doesn't happen very often. If it does,
True.
it's gonna be a big deal and you better make sure everybody's on board.
And believe me, as I said, I got a team. If I'm getting to that point,
Yeah, they know
I'm
it's
talking
coming.
about it in an executive session.
Right, so am I. I'm saying, here's where we are,
'Cause
this is the labor attorney's advice, this is what I'm gonna do, we all agree.
the reality is, a lot of times in the public sector, you try to come to a mutually agreeable separation agreement.
Right.
Because it just,
Really offer two options.
you want to have
Suggest you
certainty.
take this option.
And when you don't have,
It's not
we
just-
have somebody else making the ultimate decision, and that process, the termination is usually fairly fast, but it can take a while, especially if then go to court after that, sometimes you have to do a business, you think about it in terms of long-term business. And so there's no one right answer, it all depends on the seriousness of the situation. But
So, how, you think we can wrap up this part of our meeting?
That's true.
I
I
just,
have one additional question,
Go
if
ahead.
I might. So, first off, I appreciate both of you coming here this evening and taking the time. The one thing I was wondering, if you could recommend to us, somewhere or someone where you've seen a strong first selectman actually work. Because I think that it might be beneficial for us at some point maybe to talk to somebody in that regard.
I'd say Old Saybrook as a very good first selectman.
So I knew Mike Pace pretty well
Yeah.
because I had a project down there.
Now, Mike is retired.
I know he has, and so, that was a very similar situation to what you had in East Haddam, actually,
Right.
because it was 3 members, and he had a gentleman that used to work at the DOT as his second guy that helped him along through the
Right.
process. So, but you think that they would be the right people to speak to? I don't know who the first selectman down there is now.
It's,
Do I?
oh, why am I blanking out? Yeah, Old Saybrook, hold on. And, you know, Laura Francis is great in Durham.
Durham, yeah.
Yeah.
Susan Bransfield.
Susan Bransfield is awesome in Portland.
She's a star.
She's
Portland.
done a great job. Hold on, I'll tell you, Old Saybrook.
Rudy Marconi.
Where's Rudy Marconi?
Yeah, he's first selectman of, is it Richfield?
Richfield.
Richfield.
Um,
Yeah, he's got a lot of money.
Carl Fortuna. Carl Fortuna is Old Saybrook. It's funny, Middlesex County is almost all first selectmen
Yeah.
form of government, where Talon County is more.
The greater Hartford area is almost all managers or administrators.
Yeah.
You go out to the northeast corner and there aren't, part of that's just size. But until you get out to Killingly, and Killingly has a manager and Putnam has a town administrator. It may be vacant now because they've hired the guy that came from Landover.
I always had retired state employees in my job. You know, so they're,
Well, that's how Ed Meehan, he was the town planner, and you must have known him, I'm
Yeah.
certain. He was the town planner down in Newington for a very long time, retired, he became the first selectman of Cheshire. So,
Yeah.
it's,
so it
But along the
can
shoreline,
work.
along the shoreline, Clinton just changed to a council manager plan.
Right,
So
and you helped write that charter.
I didn't help write the charter, I presented the
Advised.
charter commission. But they're the first shoreline community that's kind of changed.
so we've gotta wrap this up. I wanted to thank you both very much for taking another night out. And when I was looking through my notes from 2007 when I served on the last Charter Revision Commission. Guess who our guest was on February 26, 2007? And guess what the issue was? So,
Wow.
time that actually has not stood still in Bolton, even though it may seem like we have not moved on. But here we are again, dealing with the same issue with the same guest, and so,
It's time for me to move on.
well, yeah. No, I really do appreciate both of you coming.
It's actually fun for us to talk about it.
That's just my report, the annual report, I just got,
Okay,
and then this
We'll
is,
see you in 10 years.
this is how we do our.
Yeah, I'm not so sure gonna hang out on
Great.
that.
good.
See how we do that.
But I have Quibbling Foundation, so I can't tell that.
I only
Thank
have
you,
one.
thank
You're
you
lucky.
very much.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Night. All
Shouldn't
right.
have volunteered.
We were both on the
If you
panel.
knew, we were talking.
We were both on the panel with Higher Job.
Oh, good job, yeah, good job, hired Josh,
Oh.
thank you
Good luck
very
to you.
much.
I'll be
Thank
starting
you.
mine next, so I'll ask you for advice.
Okay,
And eventually, we're gonna have to do ours.
yeah.
They just,
I don't know, after 30 years, you better leave it alone.
Yeah,
they,
leave it for the next guy.
they don't wanna spend the money on a charter.
Oh, gosh.
The process costs money to publish it and all that other thing. So I think if they take out the legal ad requirements, they'll go rushing in.
Yeah, that might happen.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
See you guys. See you guys.
Okay, let's move on to the next item is going to be the minutes. So let's do them separately. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 30th meeting?
We don't want to amend them first, or we want to?
No, we'll just have a motion and then second, and during discussion we will. So these are the January 30th. Is there a motion? That was Rich. Is there a second?
Right, second.
Jay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, discussion, we're talking about January 30th. Are there any changes?
These were, I didn't see anything.
Wait a minute, I haven't been there.
These are the ones Josh did.
Are you still looking, Rich?
Yeah, go ahead, no, I'm sorry, I think they're all on the other one.
Okay, so hearing nothing to change, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? May I have a motion to approve, now I just don't remember whether the February 20th, the February 11th, okay, the public hearing and meeting minutes are all
All in one.
in one, so let's combine that motion. So we have a motion to approve the February 11th public hearing and meeting minutes.
So I know there's something.
John, is there a second? Is there a second to that motion?
For sake of discussion, I'll second it. but there
Okay.
were issues with these.
Yep, all right, discussion.
Okay, on the second page, the second paragraph that starts with Bruds, I believe everything but the first two lines was actually from me.
That's what I was thinking
That's
too.
correct.
So at beginning, it takes 4 votes?
No, beginning discussion is not so much with the form of the charter, which I think is actually garbled. I don't think it's inaccurate.
Oh, okay, so starting with the word discussion.
Right. I think everything from that to the bottom of that paragraph was said by me in some form.
I concur.
Okay,
And sorry, I'm gonna ask a couple clarifying questions just so
Yes.
that I'm following along. That was the second page, second paragraph?
Second page, second paragraph, the one that starts with Bruds and bold.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I'd have to rewrite this to get it correct. So
I know,
I think it was completely garbled.
That's gonna be consistent throughout this whole discussion.
yeah,
So I'm not sure if there's a way to, we could sit here and rewrite it, but that part.
I attempted that earlier today, but I'm just very frustrated.
How important is that to spend time on that? There was no decisions taken, there was no.
Right.
That's the way I looked at this was, what's the effect of all of this? Very little, except
Yeah.
for the place I had an issue.
Right, I think if we can hit the highlights, I think there's a,
It's your issue.
I mean, usually
Very
when,
good, Jack.
when I get these kinds of things, I just take out the paragraph and change it to something like Teller commented on, and just leave it at that.
yeah,
You know,
If you'd like,
because it's almost.
we will be hiring on an interim in our office sometime soon. I could have them review footage once we have it and potentially write up something new.
I was gonna suggest that, because this is so bad, and there's so many errors, that we could spend an hour here.
if you've got,
Yeah.
that sounds like a.
Yeah, it is almost a FOIA issue with the quality of these.
Yeah, that's true, I wouldn't be able to say, if somebody said, what does this mean, I'd say, well, I'm not quite sure what this meant. So I think
Yeah,
if we can,
and when I talked to, when I talked to Cheryl in the audience, this is kind of a,
yeah.
this is a mess.
Okay, so perhaps what we should do then is table the approval of these minutes, and we table them to the March meeting, and even if they're not done by March, we could table them
If they're
again.
tabled, they'll stay tabled until we bring them back up.
Can I make one suggestion
Yes.
before we do that?
Yeah.
I think that it's important from this point forward, that anytime anybody hands us a written, or if the chairperson or anybody on this commission gets a written document from any member of the community, that we attach it to the minutes.
Yes,
Because that will solve some of the problems here.
yes,
Nowhere near all of them, but it'll give you a head start. Because she's got people testifying that wrote stuff in here, not vice versa, and vice versa for that fact of the matter, so.
Well, she references things being attached that aren't attached.
Right.
so for instance, what Milton gave us today,
Yeah,
we should
that's
attach
part of
that.
public comment.
Okay,
Perhaps we should have a correspondence item every month
okay,
on the agenda so that it
agenda.
could be part of that, and it could just reference, say, you know, see attachment.
well, that's not really correspondence, I don't think.
Well,
If
if somebody,
something's
if somebody submits something to you,
Yeah, you would think
Right.
that this is correspondence that was handed in at the meeting?
well, that's part of public comment. But if
Was that
somebody-
from Davy? Or was that from, what was
Oh,
it?
this was Milton Hathaway, but he
oh.
just handed me this tonight, so I'm just gonna write submitted by Milton Hathaway
Yeah.
and then give it
That's
to, I
part
guess
of
I'll give it
public
to
comment,
Josh.
but
But, was it, Bradley Peters?
Pete Bradley?
Pete Brad, okay, see,
Pete
there you
Brad.
go, that's how well I know him. So,
Let's take a minute.
you had it all right.
Pete Bradley obviously sent you an email, that should have been attached, in my opinion. I think, more to,
That,
Christina,
Christine should
yeah,
have.
okay,
Is
well,
it
okay, then that's
more?
my bad, so
No,
those are,
no,
well, we had
those
It's
are-
nobody's bad,
Yeah, we
it's,
hadn't
I'm just
really thought
making a suggestion, and
Yeah.
if you think it's worth doing, that's okay, and if you don't, I'm not offended. I'm
well,
just-
so the difference between, there's a difference between a submission at a meeting and and an email that comes to me. And so let's talk about how you wanna handle that, I mean, I can,
that's correspondence,
all right,
I think.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Do you want me, if I get an email from like a member of the public, do you all wanna get that?
No,
Cause you don't,
I want it, I think you should mention it as correspondence.
And read it into the record.
And-
in the, okay,
Or else distribute it at the meeting,
Yeah.
but not, if you email it to us before the meeting, then it becomes a
Right.
freedom of information
Issue.
issue.
okay,
Because you've
so like
communicated
this,
with the whole
Committee.
committee.
okay, so, so I'll submit the correspondence would be with, when I send you the agenda items for the next meeting then? Is that
It would
right?
be in
You
the
get
packet.
the emails,
Yeah, it would be in the packet that goes to us for, or at the, just have it if it's being distributed at the meeting
okay.
as
But
correspondence.
then anything submitted at meetings goes to the clerk.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So that was the point was.
It's just a thought to keep things cleaner.
Yep, I agree with you. So now we're at the point of looking for a motion to table the approval of the February 11th.
So I withdraw my motion to approve them,
Yeah.
and I'll make the motion instead to table.
Well, wait a
Okay.
minute, you seconded the motion, Adam, and I think John,
That's
No, I-
true. Yeah, John made it.
John
and you
motioned.
seconded it. So John,
Oh,
would you like to
I'll
withdraw?
withdraw the motion, you can withdraw a second.
Yeah, I withdraw the second.
Okay,
So, both
And-
withdrawn.
and then, yeah, I had it written John and then
yeah,
Adam.
that's exactly what happened, because Adam said, I'll second it just to speak about it,
That's
just so
right,
we
yeah,
can get it
that
going.
helps.
So
And then, so who's gonna make the motion to table?
Adam just did, correct?
Okay,
So-
and
Yeah, I'll second it.
and yeah, John will second that, okay, is there any discussion on the motion to table? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions.
And sorry, who seconded that?
John Toolman.
John too.
There are some issues on our list of review items, which I sent to you, that I feel are fairly open-ended and vague. And I'm wondering how the commission feels about me sending a memo to the Board of Selectmen requesting some clarification,
Articulation.
specificity, and I also would be willing to follow that up with an appearance at the next meeting, which I think is March
Third.
3rd. So I'll give you.
March 12th?
No, I would go to the
Oh, I see
selectmen's
what you're saying,
meeting.
okay.
I'll give you a couple of examples here. Appointed positions, commissions, boards, agencies, membership term, I'm sorry, no, that's a bad example. Evaluate the referendum process. Evaluate budget creation procedures. Consider other changes to the finance and tax procedures previously established by the town. Evaluate the effectiveness of the current town meeting requirements. Like these issues are, they're just, I don't understand what the issues are. No,
They're too broad.
they're too broad.
And what was their real intent when they said that? That's the key. So are you looking for a motion to do this, or are you just
Sure,
looking for, so I'll make that motion, certainly, because I believe that that's the only way we're gonna be able to get this done in some sort of an efficient and effective manner.
okay, so what's your motion?
So I move to authorize, that's the word, thank you, Gwen, the chairperson, Gwen Marion, to make an inquiry of the Board of Selectmen in regard to the items that were outlined, and what are we calling this?
Review items,
Yeah.
that's what it says in the agenda.
Right. For articulation and, clarity,
Specificity?
specificity. Fine.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
Yeah, I'll second.
Jay, okay, thank you. Is there discussion?
Yeah, briefly, I absolutely think that we should authorize our chair to ask the Board of Selectmen anything that she thinks would be of help to us.
I'm not trying to limit her, so please don't, if you think that was what I was attempting to do, it
No,
wasn't.
I didn't think so, but I just sort of feel like, just so for my own sake, once the Board of Selectmen gives us a charge and starts a charter commission, it's our job to decide what's important to look at and not. And we don't necessarily have to be tethered to their, go do this kind of attitude. I respect what they say, but they've had every opportunity to give that information to us, and they will have that opportunity to give that information to us at each of our meetings and or at the public hearing. So while I completely understand the desire to get more specifics from them, they're just 5 people who happen to have been elected for this 2 years. They're not the whole town. They're not necessarily the only source of.
So by no means did I intend this to be a limiting discussion. So first and foremost, Adam, I'm looking to find out what they're talking about.
Yeah, I
Okay?
get that.
And that doesn't mean that I'm gonna stop there, and it doesn't mean that we're gonna continue either, and we're a group and we all have to make a decision.
I guess what I'm sort of suggesting is that the fact that they made a wish list or made a list of stuff that maybe they have some vague idea about, maybe that's all they had, and maybe you're not necessarily getting more content by asking them to be specific.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like we should feel empowered either we look at that list and say, yeah, that's a problem, we should talk about it, or you know what, I don't see the problem.
Oh, I see.
I'm
You know what I'm saying?
trying to
Because you can
eliminate-
go down a lot of rabbit holes
Well, that's the
asking
problem.
people what they mean.
I don't wanna waste
I see.
And I
time.
don't wanna waste our time.
I get it.
That's all I'm saying. I don't wanna waste our time asking for stuff that they haven't if they really had thought about it and they had a problem, it was sort of incumbent on them to tell us what that problem was. And I don't wanna go finding problems that I don't think are problems.
Well, I have a different approach.
You-
I don't wanna waste our time
Exactly.
chasing down rabbit holes.
That's what I'm
Yes.
saying. That's all I'm saying.
But I also feel that I just don't think we can just ignore ones that we say, oh, you know, we're not even gonna look at the referendum process, there's no, we don't,
Right.
that's it.
They
You know,
had to
there's-
mean something.
Yeah,
when they wrote.
there's enough
has
of
to be a
those
reason
kinds of
to write
comments in
that.
here
We're
that,
mostly talking about wasting Glenn's time, right?
Well,
don't worry about that.
no, I also don't.
volunteered, so I think that's.
Yeah, she's volunteering. I mean,
But I agree
I
with
kind
you.
of
You did
didn't want to
volunteer.
make it feel like that you're responsible for going reading their minds or getting their
If it
pulling
was, if it
something
was
out.
someone, if it was
If it
another,
was real important to them, I would hope that they would have right away. Oh yeah, this is what we meant. And if not, I don't really want to
Well,
go.
now, at the end of this process, though, we do report back
Yeah.
to
That's
the
right.
board of selectmen. So we wouldn't want to completely miss something that they said, oh, no, this one has to be there or else we're gonna die.
There's a threshold there. I just,
Yeah.
again, it's A, not wasting your time, B, not wasting our time, and
Don't
C,
waste their time either.
expecting that if they really have an issue, they should stand up and say what it is, and they shouldn't have to, it shouldn't have to be too dragged out of them, if you understand.
Well, I think it'll go as far as, I'll do a
Yeah.
memo, the memo, I'll give it to Josh to be in the Board of Selectmen packet. I'll go to the meeting and I'll say, so I just asked you 5 questions, do you have any specificity? And they'll either say, you know, they'll be looking at each other and saying, I don't even know why that was in there. Or they'll say, yeah, what I meant was X, Y, and Z.
Right,
You know,
that's
and
what
I'm hoping that's as far as it'll go.
I'm hoping, that's kind of what I'm sort of saying.
I really wanted to go to that meeting, Adam, and I went so far to find out what it was. The problem is that that's the one night that I can't do it in the month of March.
I just wanted to, I plan on personally going to meet with Bob Moore and Sandy. Joyce was our town administrator for many years and she's gone. The institutional knowledge we have between those two people, who I consider to be people that are administrators as opposed to partisan political people, I would like to talk with them. And also in terms of serving on the Board of Finance for years, there's many weaknesses to that, and the fact that they've drawn that out. I believe there's a lot of merit, just as we learned a tremendous amount from these two gentlemen tonight. If we had the selectmen come once, it doesn't have to be for as long a period, I think we might get informed. There's nothing wrong with me going out, doing outreach to them, right? There's no objection to anybody on the.
You mean and to invite them to come here?
No, I'm not gonna invite them to come here. I just wanna talk to them about the meaning of some of these things, in particular, Board of Finance, and I've mentioned before that we lobbied, when I was on the Board of Finance, to have more information for the voters ahead of referendum process. So if we're asking the electorate to come and vote on the budget, what's the changes with the budget this year compared to the previous year? What are they voting on? And those finance reports we put together, which is on a historical format, are very difficult to decipher.
So in terms of the outreach, I think I would rather have the questions about clarity go to the full board instead of you asking Sandy and Bob, if I'm hearing you right. Because it could be that maybe it was Kim Miller who brought up one of them, or Bob DiPietro,
Oh, I get that.
or Mike, you know, so I'd like to ask all 5 of them at once, so they can figure out, well, who asked that question?
And that is the point of the motion that was made, seconded, to have you do it.
No, I understand it in terms of the meeting with all of them, but I'm asking for your opinion about me meeting with them as an individual to get their opinions on some things.
I
Well,
don't,
the motion's asking the very same thing of the entire board, which will include those 2 people.
I'm aware of that.
yeah, but you might have a conversation about something else too.
Well, we said that, we talked about quorums and things. Now, I'm not trying to do anything underhanded. I just want see if there's any,
I don't think we're in charge of who you can and can't
Right.
talk to.
no, but I'm just trying to be.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but that, really,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
I think every one of us should find the sources of information we think are helpful
Okay.
to us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Decision.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a motion on the table, and it was seconded. Is there any other discussion on it? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Establishing the subcommittees. You saw my proposed breakdown? Eleanor asked to be put on the procedural subcommittee. Does anybody else have any preferences?
I had a quick question for you, Gwen.
Yeah.
Were we gonna, as a group, do form of government?
Yes.
So
So that's everybody.
that's everybody's really the other three.
Yeah, chapter 8 though covers
Kind
a
of
little bit
combo.
more than just form of government.
Yep.
So I do think that there should be a group that looks at chapter 8 other than the question of doing away with the Board of Finance.
Makes sense.
My choice would be budget and taxation.
Okay,
I'd be the same on that.
okay. Phew, I was worried nobody was gonna take that. Yay.
I would just.
So I'm inclined to lean towards the other group, Gwen, if it's at all possible.
Well, there's 2 other ones.
Yeah, so I wanted to look at the, particularly chapter 3, 7,
Okay, that's
I think
structural.
10, structural.
Okay,
I think I'd also like to be on that one.
So
okay.
Adam, in all, and I knew we were gonna come to this at some point, in all fairness, I think that you have a conflict there that we're gonna have to sort through.
What's that?
Well, because I think there's gonna be some changes proposed to both the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Wetland Commission, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. At least I intend to make some of those recommendations. So as the chairperson of that, one of those particular committees, I think that there's a little bit of a challenge there.
Oh,
I could be incorrect, but it's all about appearance, as we all know.
Well,
Well,
you'd say that about anything,
You sure could.
so, I mean,
so what is your point? I mean, cause the subcommittees are going to discuss and come up with a report to the larger commission.
Right.
Would Adam have to recuse himself from?
Throughout the whole thing.
Throughout the whole thing?
That's my opinion, in regard to those items.
I disagree.
And,
Okay.
yeah, that's interesting.
Hey, we got
Because the statute
attorneys on the board.
specifically
Hey, I'm
allows.
not this board's lawyer, man, I'm not allowed to do that.
Neither am I.
Right, the statute specifically allows sitting elected officials to be on
To be
the,
on this board.
on this commission.
Yeah.
So, and doesn't
that
say
doesn't-
anything about requiring them to recuse themselves when they discuss the commissions. that
It's a
they sit
personal
on.
choice. I'm just pointing it out. If you disagree, that's your,
Also-
prerogative.
Also, nothing that happens with this charter can affect an existing term of office.
No, agreed.
It won't go into
Right.
effect until the term of office is over.
I understand.
So, and who's to say I would even stand for election or re-election or be re-elected? So,
Who's to say there's gonna be an election?
right.
I
So-
suspect that's not gonna be the case. So,
Well, I might not disagree with you. How do you know?
I don't, I'm just, Adam, I'm pointing it out. I would feel a little, so everybody approaches these things a little differently. And if you're comfortable, then it's fine. I'm just voicing my concern at this point.
I'm comfortable.
Okay.
And your concern is from an appearance of impropriety standpoint rather than a technical, ethical issue.
I'm more concerned, so if you looked at, I'm sure you're an attorney, so you understand what a conflict of interest is.
I do.
Yeah. And
Well,
I've done.
kinda,
I've
because it's
done-
really complicated.
And it is, and there's a lot written about it, especially in regards, so I've done a lot of research on it related to planning and zoning commissions. Not so much related to any other type of commission. And so, everybody has to make their own determination. I was always a person that erred on the side of caution. That doesn't mean that I was right, it's just how I approach things. So if I had an attorney that came in front of the planning and zoning commission in the town and said to us, I represent Joe Smith, and he happened to have represented me at some time in my career, I would tell everybody that right up front. And I'd say, if anybody's uncomfortable, I'm ready to walk out the door right now. And so that people will have an opportunity to make a decision. That way there's no question.
Yeah, which
So
you're talking about.
I'm on the safe side, Jay, that's
Yeah,
what I
so,
am.
but you're not saying there's a technical, ethical question, because there are technical rules that govern when there's a conflict, and that would not be a technical conflict. But for appearance's sake, you would recuse yourself because that's the way you would go. And I think, right.
In 90% of the cases, Jay, my experience, 90% of the cases, the conflict is the appearance of the conflict.
Yeah.
That's your biggest challenge. So that's what, so if Adam's comfortable, that's his prerogative. I'm not gonna stand here and I'm not standing on ceremony, I'm just pointing it out because I might have approached it a little differently if the seats were changed,
So
that's all.
gentlemen, our goal was to get out at 9 o'clock, I think.
Yeah.
So are we all comfortable with having Adam serve on that subcommittee, even though it does have issues having to do with the commission that he serves on?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it.
I am.
Okay. All right, so, John, which subcommittee would you like to serve on?
Now, we're all on form of government, right?
Yes,
Budget and taxation,
okay. And then, so
and
I'll serve with Eleanor then on procedural. So that's 2 on structural, 2 on procedural, and 3 on budget and taxation. Okay, Josh, we have run out of time, so if you'd like to submit your written thoughts about the administrative officer position, you could do that. Or if we are going to have, are we going to have another, the other question was that the former town manager of Cheshire did not want to submit written comments, but he offered to come. Do we want more guests to come on? Well, you say sure, but we have to think about our timeline
Yeah.
here.
Well,
This was an entire meeting of
Yeah,
just
right,
one issue.
yeah.
We've got a lot of issues to deal with.
I thought this was really helpful.
yes.
I don't think we need more people who would talk about the same issues.
I agree with that. Do you,
you're right.
I mean, I feel like, because I feel like, and if you read that Simsbury document that I sent you, forget about what's actually happening in Simsbury right now. I thought that was an excellent.
be a good idea, Gwen.
Well, I think it was an excellent way, they talked about a lot of the pros and cons of both sides. So I feel like we have defined the issues, and now it's just a matter of us talking about what's right for Bolton.
I would concur with that assessment, with the caveat that when you go to the selectmen, if it was a benefit to have like Bob and Sandy come here together, I think that might be very insightful.
I think those are the 2 people that it would be, if we're going to have anybody else, those would be the 2 best people to have. So,
The only other thing I was going to add, I think the only other dimension that this individual from Cheshire might add is he was the administrator who became the manager and would be able to talk about the transition that they saw there a number of years ago. And I know that we had also talked, Gwen and I, about there is an individual who's on the Charter Revision Commission who I happen to know and have reached out to, who may either be willing to submit written response or might be willing to come in person to talk about, who is now a town councilor. And gone through that transition. So just talking about transitions in general.
Or have a subcommittee of us, 2 or 3 people go visit them.
Right,
They-
there's
we
that
could do
too.
that too, okay.
Glenn, the only thing that I would like to see is somebody from a strong form of government other than an administrator come. So, that's why I asked that question, these 2, and I think that they gave us 5 or 6 good recommendations. I don't know if we'd be shortchanging ourselves if we didn't hear from somebody on that side of the equation as well.
And that would
Especially
be
because
a-
those towns are more in line with the size of this community than the other two towns. I know, Columbia is close, but certainly Coventry is, 2.5 times the size of this.
So this would be a strong first selectman?
Yeah, like, any one of those people, I don't, you pick.
Like what Mark was in East Haddam,
Right,
that
right,
kind of, okay.
Right, so he gave you, or gave us, excuse me,
Or
Old Saybrook,
Durham, Portland,
Durham,
and Clinton.
Portland,
But
right,
no, Clinton is town manager now.
Ridgefield, and Clinton. He said that Clinton just changed.
Right. Do you want to devote another meeting to this? I mean, it would take up a good part of another meeting.
I would like to see, maybe we consider that in a month or two, let's see if we get going on some of these other issues.
Okay,
Throwing out for consideration.
all right. And then in the meantime, Josh, you've put out requests for written information.
Yep.
So we'll be getting that in. Do
As you can see, there are already two at your place.
Yes.
Yep.
So is that the kind of information that I should disseminate to you when I get it, as opposed to public comment?
I like to read it ahead of time.
Yeah, I do
So
too.
I'm,
All right, so then Josh, you could lump yours in too, if you'd like to write out your comments.
Well, what I would, the other part of this is timing. I don't know if you would like to make a decision and then hear a reflection, or if you'd like to hear some of my thoughts up front, but I am just leaving the door open. I won't be making any comments unless specifically asked.
I'd like to read what you have to say before we make a decision.
Okay. In that case, I can send it to you, Gwen, and anybody else who wants to read it can take a look at that.
Okay,
Okay.
Good.
Kind of a different.
yes, go
I
ahead.
just want to bring up, in terms of our agenda, would it be possible to have new business before we close out the meeting as added as an item? And I have two quick things to say. Appreciate the town allowing me to use their email address, but I'm going to send to everybody. I've set up a Gmail account. It works better with, I'm Google based. I don't want to use Internet Explorer. So I have an email address I've set up. I'll send it out to everybody.
Okay,
Two, I had suggested previously, and Eleanor agreed to go with me. We were just gonna go to the Board of Education and tell them that we're doing this and tell them what the effort is and share the letter and what's in the current town charter. And Eleanor, I believe, sent a letter to you, Gwen.
Yep.
If we could send it out to, and we wanna make sure that the letter's agreeable to everybody on the commission. And then I also think it's a good idea for a couple of us to go to the Board of Finance and make sure we tell them that what's under consideration from the selectmen, which may be the elimination of the Board of Finance. And so we get some feedback from them, what they think of that idea, if that is to happen. And to just get their perspective as opposed to them coming here and losing time on a meeting.
I think that's a good idea.
And we will send, maybe, I don't know if Eleanor's willing to go with me. Does anybody want to go to Board of Finance with me?
I would say those of you, Jay and John, you would probably be the likely people to go to that.
And so
Meeting.
I'll work it out with
So-
you two guys, go the three of us or just one or two, and we'll draft a letter and turn it into the group before we go.
The letter to the Board of Ed was fine, and I wrote back to you and Eleanor saying that, so you can just go ahead and send
Good.
that. And it doesn't need the whole commission
Whatever you're,
approval on
sure,
that,
thank
because
you.
that was really a very standard letter. You're not making any representations
That's right.
on behalf of the board.
That was our intent.
Okay, so the next meeting is March 12th, and if you, well,
Where are we meeting?
yeah, Josh, do you know?
That is a great question. Hold on one second.
Okay,
Is Thursday, March 12th, the Board of Ed meeting?
I believe you're gonna be in town hall.
okay. I think that the Board of Ed does meet on, there are a lot of Thursdays that they're meeting,
Yeah.
so. could be. All right,
Wait, I have one
Okay, go ahead.
proposal. When we consider, and just this is for consideration, do we want to do away with needing to second motions? We can modify our rules where we don't have to second motions. We're a small enough group. I'm putting that out for, this is not even for discussion. We'll think about it whether you want it next time. Because we have so many things that we move just to discuss that I don't necessarily want to support the motion. I don't want to be on the advocacy side of it, but why are we seconding motions?
Seconding is just so that it allows,
table.
seconding just allows discussion to happen. If there's no seconding, then we don't discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, and the question is, are we a small enough group where we don't need two people to bring something to discussion? If one person can bring something.
If it's such an unpopular item and nobody seconds it, you know you're not gonna talk about it.
Yeah, I'm just putting that out there
That's
as
the purpose of
a,
Robert's rules, that's
yeah.
what that's what it
well,
does.
yes, and in small
And
groups, you
I've seen
frequently
it happen in small
modify the
groups that-
rules.
I've seen it where if you don't get a second, it's like everybody else is telling that person, it's like,
That's true, that's true.
you know, we're not,
I'll
we don't
look
wanna hear
into
what you
that.
have to say.
I'll look into that issue.
About that.
I think we do need a set of procedures so that if things start to go awry, we have the rules to rely on. But if there is a set of rules, if Roberts say in a certain number of, in a board setting with a certain number of people, you don't have to have a second, then we can talk about that. So I'll look into those rules. I really don't know. I've never heard of that.
I would like to make the controversial motion that we dismiss for the evening.
That I heard you actually don't have to do. Did you know that? That's what the Sandy.
I've heard that rumor before.
Yeah, okay, well, we don't, do we wanna have a second on this one? Yeah, somebody said.
There's no objection.
We don't need the.
No, that's right, no objection, we don't need a motion.